Hello everyone, Kurt over here, and welcome back to another episode from Hilt Labs. Today we continue on with Fiore's armored sword, and we're going to be looking at 3 plays that I believe actually work in conjunct with how we utilize the sword is a multi-tool of pain and to comply someone into a position, as well as how it can be achieved both over and above the arms, the line of crossing on an arm. Now, these 3 plays right here are back-to-back. Again, this goes back to a concept that we've talked about before within other sections of the manuscript, where we might be getting just kind of things that you can do there to achieve the same type of a thing, which may apply back to Fiore's piece of advice in the very beginning, which is that we have to look at the person across from us, and then we're going to apply based off of that. So before I get too far into this right here, again, it's not that these are complicated things right here. They don't warrant too much of their own thing. But I feel like they're all the same theme of access right here that speak to that kind of node, which is why I've lumped them all together. So we're going to talk about that today. But before we do so, don't forget, like, subscribe, share with a friend out there, and please, if you have any questions about this right here, don't hesitate to leave a comment below. Don't forget to hit that bell to be notified when new content is dropped. And as always, it is appreciated if you share this with people because we want to have you here on this journey of Fiore's martial arts. So with that being the case here, let's get into it. Okay, so this week here, like I said before, we're going to be looking at 3 plays back to back to back, and they are scrolling across the screen right now as I'm talking about this. The reason why I'm doing this right here is to talk about is because the reality is these 3 plays, I think they teach more about the usage of this in its totality, and it's a continuation of what we talked about before, how we use the point to stick, the point to throw. But now we're talking about the other side right here, which is your hilt portion of the sword. This Fiore really doesn't really have a lot in regards to like massive plays about this because I don't think it really needs to be that verbose or and whatnot. The reality is it's very simple. You threaten one area and you go another, and you go off that rotation, which is just opposite one-on-one. So the picture that we're talking about here, we're going to start off with is this. And essentially right here, I'm crossing somehow, some way, shape, or form here. We're in a half sword situation. We'll start with half sword. We've crossed in something along this lines right here. And in this point right here, I've caused something to make her shift across to try to clear this. Or maybe she tries to strike at me. And we come across and we have the pommel and this handle right here in place. Now, with this being the case, you got to remember, essentially, this can be as much of a response as a defense as possible because, again, based on height and everything else, is going to be dependent upon which portion of this do we use. So, in this case right here, if I have it, so say in this case right here, I threaten her and she decides to do a very wide sweep across to protect herself, this doesn't mean my crossguard's there and I have the access to utilizing the pommel to turn, to strike across, and to work across in this way, right? So that's really talking about how, the butt end of the pommel. On other cases right here, so maybe I go low and she pushes across. And now we're in a spot right here where the leveraging point is in the eye of using the crossguard, okay? So both these options over top allow me to gain access. We're going to switch sides just so we can see a little more as far as the movement on that. So again, for the first play of this, and again, like both of these right here working hand in hand because essentially they're not that different, but they are talking about this rotation which allows us to kind of get to a position where we can strike with the hilt of the sword and then throw over utilizing a volta stabile or mezzovolta of the foot. So cross right here. We'll go off this case right here where she threatens at me. I threaten and I rotate in defense, which puts this right here where the crossguard is in the spot where I can hit, right? So I can hit in the visor. If she's got an open face helmet, it's going right into her face, any shape or form on that. Additionally, say I go low, I throw a slow on this right here and she turns offline. Well, now I have the pommel spot right here. And again, for the full totality of this, as I crack her in the face, I'm coming across, engaging my foot behind, and then there's your throw right there to toss her over the leg. Now, this works in a half sword situation, but it also works in a sword in 2 hand situation. So if we go back to that initial crossing of what's shown in armor, where the person has a single hand grip on it, it works the same way. So I can be in the bastard cross or the Vera crochet, it doesn't matter in the case right here, it doesn't matter because essentially I'm going to be making this kind of rotation which will allow me to rotate off. I'm using the crochet de bastarda because it's a little bit easier for me today. So she throws a shot at me, as far as this goes, I come off to the side, right? So I'm coming here, I gather this, and I'm going to come across, and then there's your pommel strike right in the face. Or I have this right here where I hit her in the face, as far as this. Her feet are backwards to the image of this right here, but it doesn't matter. That's the whole thing about this is that it does not matter how this works. If she had maybe she decides to probe with an accrescimento at me. Same kind of concept. And based upon, maybe she pulls up, maybe she pulls down, maybe whatever this right here is going to turn where I put the sword in concept to each other right here. And that's just to talk about the over portion of all, because both of those, if you notice, they come over the person's arm, which allows a high end throw against the person for a trip plan. The last of the three on this, and again, those first two right there I lumped together because it's really the same strike and concept, but you're just having which portion right here, take your pick, is going to be going under the arm. So if we start with that half sword crossing, where we're here in position, maybe I decide to thrust up at her like this, and she decides to shoot her hands high at me. Something like this. Well, in this case, I have underneath the arm here that we can work off. So that's the whole point of this right here. And again, that's the connection point, because by coming underneath, I have the strike to the jaw, and I also have hooking the arm to go down the other way. This can also be very, very much so the cross guard is striking or the pommel is striking. It's just going to be dependent upon where we are as far as in the crossing and how it is made. So both those right there, whether it's above or below, is really going to be dependent on the person. In this case right here, because of stature, I might be more apt to go over the arm, where Brandy might be more apt to go shooting through and use that pommel as a strike under the arm to make that third play. So we'll switch sides so you can demonstrate that. You cross here, and instead of trying to, if she tries to go over at me, as far as this, my arm bevels on this. So instead, she puts the arm up and through, and it's right through to my face immediately. So you have up and over in both options right here to create that kind of thing. Same time too here, maybe she hits me in the face, maybe she doesn't. Maybe I get away from this, but now she's got a hook to turn the rest of the body downwards, towards, away, into a throw as she steps backwards or moves forward in some form or fashion. So all those crossing techniques right there that happen at the half sword, at this right here, it's just going to be a matter of how we make the crossing with the person. A couple opportunities on this right here, just as quick down and dirty. We've already seen as far as the manuscript where someone thrusts in with an accrescimento or to the full passare mezzovolta. That right there is one set situation. Another set situation is maybe she decides to thrust high at me, and I'm in Vera crochet, so she throws a high serpent at me. And I come across, and she turns against into me. So she's turning into me right here. I've got the point over top. She doesn't want to get stuck, so she turns away towards the blow, and now I have an opening shot. That's just one opportunity right there in which that might happen. Another one right here that might be fun to tie back to the sword in two hands within the largo section is maybe we're both in a two-handed grip on the pommel, on the handle situation, so we get a little bit of space here. And maybe in this case right here, I decide to throw a Mazzano, turn in, and a thrust, right? So on this, as she carries this across, there's your pommel strike, your eye shot, right? Or if she counters that, as she comes in with this, so one more time. Strike. She counters this. She grabs onto her. She goes in a half sword. And as I'm coming across this way, I try to muscle this right here, which here gives her access direct into a pommel strike into me. And we're starting to see the same kind of applications right here. So if all three of these plays are viable from a variety of different types of situations, they're seen within the sword in two-hand section, they're seen in the armored sword, it doesn't necessarily matter. The whole point here is the leveraging about threatening in to try to hit somebody to create opportunity to the other side and strike them utilizing this portion of the sword in all of its aspects.
So as you can see with the video, essentially here we're seeing three plays of the same concept all back to back to back. And two of them are, as I said before, they are coming over the arm. In some way, you've turned the person in some form or fashion, and you're utilizing either the pommel or the crossguard. In the images you can see right here, in some places when it comes to the pommel, there's clearance for that more massive extension to reach out to striking somebody. Whereas with the crossguard, if I turn down, the person might be guarding it with their arm harness or some type of crossing right there. So I may not be able to hit with the pommel, but I can still hit with the crossguard itself and cause the person to turn. These are very, this is no different than, the pommel strikes that we've seen in other concepts right here, where we have this apex point in the center of the crossing, which allows us to shift and turn in different directions. And this is very important, especially when it comes down to armor, because armor, even though you are protected and covered, you're not without your vulnerabilities. And being heavier and into a direction of going forward, because we've talked about before, the posture being kind of more along the lines of being in reverse triangle to like an inverted triangle, because the weight is upwards, it's very easy to lose and shift off those crossings. This makes it those crossings and those kind of gravitational and also abilities to maintain structure there all the more important, especially when we're talking about getting close to trying to getting a point or loop into an arm in different forms and fashions. So again, that's just kind of where this is right here. Is like, even though these three plays are, you're looking at different usages of the sword, and you're also looking at different ways in which you can enter in on the person. So there's coming above or underneath the arms. You have different ways that you can kind of hook the person to create different options. And like we've talked about with an abrazare, the concept of effective strikes, where you hit somebody to turn them to get an advantage on somebody, is at play here. Now, I will tell you, in some of my armored fighting that I've done, pommel strikes and any type of concussive blow to the visor of the helmet, while you may not feel it directly to your face, for me, it is always a little bit rattling and jarring, especially with it when it rings in the ears. There have been times when my visor has smacked into my face, and that has never been pleasant in itself. And while these images show, Fiore doing this to people that are they have nothing that's covering the face, it's unvisored. If I've experienced this with a visor and it's jarring and rattling, then you can imagine how much more effective this right here goes back to, the effective strikes. Interestingly enough here, again, I believe this goes back to a concept that I'm really kind of playing with in myself here and also thinking about, which is that the whole totality of armazari is abrazare. But armazari is just weaponized, combat-enhanced abrazare, and that's what we're looking at. Because one of the advices that Fiore gives us in there is that essentially where they are unarmored, to fall on into strike areas which cause, great damage to a person. And he lists those out there being the eyes and temples and under the throat and whatnot. That's exactly where he's hitting right here in some form or fashion. And in those crossings is able to get to different areas. So that's all that these three plays right here really are to me. They are more about the symbolization of how to use the totality of the sword to cause great hurt and effect on somebody that allows them to fall, topple, etc., and to get the person onto the ground, which is the greater danger for somebody that's in armor, and the methodology way to do that. So you have the ability to look at the sword, and once again, which ties back to these 6 dissimilar guards or grips, depending on how you want to look at that, because the reality is you're using different parts of the sword as the totality of the weapon. So that's going to do it for this video right here. Again, a little bit long-winded at the end as far as why these three things come together. But I do think it's important because essentially I don't think these are plays. They're just ways, they're teaching points of telling people how in this period of time and our present time, how to use a sword to its max potential and not just limiting it to the blade or the pommel, because everything in here is absolutely effective, especially when it comes down to grappling in armor. So again, with that being the case here, that's going to do it for this video here. Again, don't forget, share with a friend out there, like, subscribe. Thank you for stopping by. And as always, until I see you, please stay safe out there, train well, and fight on. I'll see you all soon.